open forum style panel. Really looking forward. Thank you guys all for coming and joining us. We're going to have some really great people. A couple of just kind of quick little guidelines. One, if you have any questions at any point, you'll see a nice little chat to the right of your screen. Go ahead and type them in at any time. There is a direct messaging feature, so just be mindful that speakers sometimes cannot be using that during the event. You just want to keep them a little bit on focused. But first and foremost, I wanted to welcome you. My name's Erin. I work at Neurable and lead communications and marketing, and I'm so thankful that you guys can come to our event on design and innovation. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the next way of wearables, what new design features are coming, and everything else that's kind of around this ecosystem. So we're waiting for one more quick little speaker here in a sec. If you have any questions, oh, there, speak of the devil. If you have any questions at all, again, use that nice little chat feature. But first and foremost, wanted to take some time to first off, thank our lovely panelists for coming. So thank you so much. I wanted to kind of bring together the different product designers, those who are really building and innovating in design and communications. And we're going to talk a little bit today about not only how to make a pretty product, but one that actually functions well, because we do know that's part of like the challenge to building in this industry. So first and foremost, going to take a second and introduce our panelists here. So we have Jan Kukla, who's from Oura, if you just want to wave. He started kind of in Finland to improve the way that we live our lives. One thing that he's an interdisciplinary designer. He's got about 15 years experience working at various consumer technology companies and startups, both in San Francisco and internationally. Currently, he's a senior user experience designer at Oura. So welcome, Jan. Thanks for coming. Next up, we've got, thank you. Next up, we have David Flinner, who's co-founder and head of product at Levels. So for those of you who don't know, Levels is a health and wellness company. It's one of my favorite to watch. They really are interested in that. How do we take that personal health knowledge and kind of make it happen? So previously, before his time at Levels, he was a product lead at Google. So he managed a lot of the consumer payment experiences and international payment systems. So welcome.
Here.
Next up, we have Teresa Guerrera. She now is a product manager at iRobot. It does a lot of like global consumer robot companies that kind of do a lot of fun things around your house. So really cool company. I'm really jealous I don't have 20 of them in my house. Previously, before that, she worked as a user experience design at Bose, as well as HubSpot and Eastman Kodak Company. So combining that human side with science. Next up, we have Patrick Torres from Studio Freight. He's the founder and creative director there. He's a New York City-based creative director, has done a lot of work with Root Insurance, Netflix, Abrams Brooks, Will Smith, and Patrick Mahomes, as well as kind of helping us out with Neurable for a little bit things. So welcome. Lastly, we have Joseph Pacheco, and he is a lead product designer at Potato. So he's based in San Francisco right now, and he's been working in design for over 10 years, kind of working with problems and tackling solutions with things like Disney, Marvel, and Google. So thank you all for coming. And again, if you have any questions along this process, feel free to use the chat. We're happy to kind of take them. This will also be recorded. So if you missed it the first time go around, we will have conversations and be able to kind of tackle in the future. So I wanted to kick things off. It's 2021. We're living in the future. It's a new era. We probably didn't predict that we would be working from home and rather driving hover cars all around. But I wanted to toss this panel with the first little questions. How do you, each of our lovely panelists, engage or design with wearables in your current company? So whether are you branding them or do you work with them every day, so on and so forth. I think it's always
I want to jump in.
Yeah.
David Flinner with Levels. And so we certainly work with wearables day in, day out. And Levels makes it easy for people to understand how their diet is affecting both their health and their lifestyle choices by providing a real-time stream of your bio information from wearable devices. So what we're doing to start is we are expanding access to continuous glucose monitors. And these continuous glucose monitors are providing a real-time 24/7 view of your body's your body's blood sugar data, and that's at the core of your personal metabolism. And metabolism is really at the foundation of a lot of what makes your body tick, what gives us energy, how we work, and it's at the foundation of a lot of the things that we care about approximately, like our energy levels, yeah, things day to day, our mood, all sorts of stuff like that, and then also long term issues with our health and longevity and things we care about, and chronic conditions. And so what Levels is doing is, as the technology has progressed over the decades, we now are at this point where there are these continuous glucose monitors that have historically been used for the management of medical issues, and we're taking that same data that's available for that everyone should have access to, providing that access, and we provide the insights layer on top of it to make it simple to understand and help people understand their health, but more specifically their day-to-day choices and how those choices will lead up to improved or worsened health, and then how to improve, and then motivation to get there. So we are intimately involved in the biowearable space. It's core to who we are, but a lot of our core competency is on the software side, the layer on top of it, interpreting it.
I think that's a great thing that you bring up, David, is the wearables and this biometric data is totally one side of it, but I think the side that we don't talk enough about is that actual design. So sometimes when we are dealing with this new future, and I know this is something Patrick and I have talked a little bit about, is like you can design something and have these like super in-depth, data, but when you actually like bring it to a consumer level, there's a lot of design work or interpretation that needs to happen. And I would love to kind of hear some of your guys' experiences as we take very complex topics and like, what are some key design things that we should rely on when you're taking this biometric data and turning it to a consumer interface? So.
Yeah, I can chime in on Oura said. So for folks that don't know what Oura is, it's a wearable ring that empowers you to live a healthier life through understanding your sleep and recovery and overall health a little better. And my role at Oura is really day-to-day is understanding the different life contexts and how Oura fits your lifestyle and how your lifestyle choices and your environment really affect your health. And so in more concrete terms, we're gathering all of the different signals and inputs that relate to your health, whether it's your body signals, your mind, or your environment, and translate those into outputs or experiences that make sense and kind of give you insights around all of those aforementioned things.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of Oura is it fits into a natural form that we're so used to every day. Like we all can, like I could tell you what a ring is, not the processes. It's just really nice to see. And it looks like I both had Patrick and Joseph. I saw them kind of pull off their finger off the mute button at the same time. I love that. I love the little flashing of that.
Yeah, Patrick, if you don't mind, I'll step in here. I think one of the biggest things, we live in such a kind of like crazy industry right now that we're all going through the apocalypse and we're all trying to navigate that. And I always go back to the foundational, questions that we need to ask when we're creating these products, right? It's like, what is it? What is the end goal? What problem are we trying to solve? And what is its mission? I'm very big on, if we can understand these foundational questions and we can really begin to understand our audience and what we are creating. And so from a design side, just questions. That is how we learn to identify what it is we're creating, the problem, demographic, etc.
And that's a great point. I think really taking time to know the person that you're working with is important.
Yeah, and to piggyback, I guess, off of the last two comments there, I think it's really important to understand how these things fit into people's lives already. The last thing I think anybody needs is one more thing to manage in their lives. So as we start to design things that fit into people's lives and how those things could be passively worked into how we're going about our day, I think the better. But also being able to give people access to what's under the hood, right? And really listening to what they have to say about those points of interaction or the way that it fits into their lives. Because, going back a few years, like you look at Google Glass, and the whole point was to like take this away from people, right? So there's no longer a barrier between like the outside world and your experience. And I think there was just so much that was learned from that. And I think that the next generation of wearables is taking cues from the, I guess, like unintended missteps that were a result of that project. I still think it's really important and it's still really cool. But again, the biggest takeaway for me is like, how can we design things that fit into people's lives already? Like the Oura Ring is a great example of that, or some things that the folks at Neurable are working on, I think, are also great examples of how those things fit into people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. It's like, I think we all have enough junk. I don't know if you're like me, and every time you move, you feel like you're getting rid of all these things that were once so desired or so needed that we collected in our house and sort of, but it's interesting. And I wanted to, it's a great point, great segue to the next question I have is, how do you, when you're looking at this new industry of like 100 years from now, like we all thought it was going to be flying cars and we're still not there yet, but how do you start designing for that new industry? Like, I think a lot of like the work that Teresa is going, sorry to kind of call you, but like, I'm like, how do we we didn't even know where this is going from now. And how do we start making this innovation seem quote unquote normal?
Yeah, I think part of it is always back to what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the questions we're trying to answer? And a lot of the times the breakthrough technology, right, is stuff you didn't know you needed until it's there for you. And finding that way to infuse that into a life where it's going to be a little different and you've got to like have enough of a jump to go there, but not making it so strange that you're just not ready for it. And it's really kind of finding that happy medium where you can push the boundaries, provide some solution where you just make someone's life better in whatever condition you're trying to solve, and really helping advance all of the technological capabilities we have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, one quick comment on that made me think of, so the data set that we're dealing with is pretty unique. It's like for the first time, people have access to their metabolic data. And one of the challenges we have is that for a like a subdiabetic population, just your general population out there really isn't a lot of data out there as to what it all means. And so we don't fully know yet ourselves. The population doesn't know yet themselves. And so one of our problems is, how do we kind of anchor and frame this so that it's easy to understand for people and meet them kind of in a context that makes sense? So how do you take the raw data and what framework are people already thinking in a way that they can easily slot into this? So I think like aesthetically, trying to build a brand that that feels a bit more approachable, something that's a bit more aspirational or dignifying, and is less about like, oh, I have a problem and this is something that I have to use that's forced upon me to solve my problem. That's like, no, I get to use this. This is something that is going to help me and empower me and provide agency. So I think anchoring to that, and then in some of the scoring that we're trying to do, relating it to other systems like a letter grade that people in the United States may be familiar with. Things like that are just two ways we've approached that.
Yeah, I think I draw a lot of parallels to smartwatches, right? Like you bring up a really good point of like, we have a lot of stuff and we're still figuring out where that data is coming from, but whatever, 5 years ago, we were all like, oh my goodness, I can get my text messages and my notifications on my wrist. And now we're like, okay, I don't want so many notifications on my wrist, guys, like overwhelmed. Like, I don't need to know if someone liked my cat Instagram photo. It's a very like fine line between how much data do you need and how much data do you want and how much data actually helps you. There's a lot of data points we can come up with now, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, and those are all really good points. And one thing to keep in mind when, pushing the envelope for designing new industries, there are some fundamentals that never change. It's kind of like when you think about our biology and psychology, it's like we have Stone Age biology and godlike technology. And how do you marry the two? And how do you design for humans, And it is a lot of trial and error that you have to go through when you first start.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting, I always rely on like the Don Norman philosophies of like the littlest details can make the biggest difference in some of these things. So I'd be curious, as we start to build in this industry and we build at the forefront of, inspiration, what are your references? So I just dropped Don Norman, who's one of the people I look up to a lot for design and user experience. But what are some of the principles of design that we rely on a lot to help communicate the future? And how do we use these principles to help us navigate this new and upcoming market?
Here, I'll kick off on this one. So I think one of the biggest things that I've, like, me personally, is learning from what has already been created, right? Like what has helped, what hasn't helped, and how can we push this idea forward? So it's almost kind of like recycling. Maybe there was something that wasn't working 5 years ago that maybe we're at a time right now that we do need to recycle because maybe we just weren't in that set mindset, or the technology wasn't there yet. So just really learning from our history and our past really do help us move forward, by helping us learn, what mistakes or whatnot, or what not to do and stuff like that.
I think it's
to extend on that a little bit too. I think that there is an aspirational part of this, and there's an emotional part of this which doesn't change, right? Like people still feel connected to the world and to other people, and one new way to do that is through wearable technology and emerging technologies in other places. And I think that human experience is it's important to keep that in mind when we're trying to communicate these things. Like even if we're creating something, or a company in particular is working on something that could change the way that the world does everything. Like iPhones are like the best in class example, obviously, of this thing that's now almost ubiquitous in at least some countries. It's important that we keep it grounded and say, like, the whole reason is to make your life better, right? And to get people really excited about what the possibilities are with technology. There's a weird line with wearables. I think it starts to freak people out when you start to extract this like biometric data from them. Like, what are you doing with that? Where's that going? Do I have to get something implanted in me? You know what I mean? So it's tricky because like how that information gets read, I think, can be a little scary for folks. And it's definitely something that we've had to talk about in our discussions around creating the communications for these types of technologies. And I think the best thing to do is acknowledge it, and then also lead with clarity and principles. State what you believe in and tell people and be honest with them. I think that's important. And I think that's such a big part of brand too. Is like, that's how you stand out, is you are unabashedly yourself, and you'll find customers that will connect with you.
well said, Patrick. Well said. And Teresa, did you have something to add to that?
I was just going to add, and it's along the same lines, as it's new and as it's getting more and more personal, building that trust, building that relationship so that you are being as transparent as to say, hey, here's the data we're collecting, here's how it's being used, it's, when it is yours or how it may also be used. And it's really making people feel comfortable with what they're opting into and having them trust you with that, because it is very personal and it is a new frontier.
Yeah, I think honesty goes a long way, right? Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, this is one of the orienting principles that we have as a company and a team, and is very much our customers, our members own their data, and we are stewards of that, and we're lucky and thankful that they entrust their data with us. But first and foremost, they own everything, and we have a responsibility to be very honest about what we're doing, provide transparency, clarity, and then any solutions and insights that we offer at this stage in the company, where we're not like 5 years in where we have all sorts of more advanced data analytics on it. We should only be providing the level of detail that we're confident in you actually seeing your data and letting you, equipping you both with the raw data, but helping you understand it to the level that we are confident that we can help you understand it. So we try to not kind of like get ahead of our skis in that front. But I think the overarching principle is respect for the customer, and trying to, it's not our data, it's your data.
I smile because I see a lot of the Neurable folks clapping along to what you said, because that's something we have a lot of internal conversations about, is really being not only like honest with our data, but secure, and being like, we're not misleading, we're not moving forward, like we're being very, taking that data ethics of something in mind. And I think, thanks guys, you guys are doing awesome with the segues today. I think as we're starting to build in biometric, and we're starting to like really, I think Jan kind of put this well, of we're at this frontier of like innovative technology and biometric data, and we're kind of almost in this godlike state in some ways. What special considerations do we need to take care of when we're moving things that have these insights to a consumer audience where they're going to be more widespread? And what extra like data protections do we need to have, or even how we communicate the data that we do have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And with Oura, it's easier when you're a smaller company. Obviously you have the giants kind of in the space as well. To some degree, being a smaller company on the field, there's a benefit to that. And you can create trust from scratch. And privacy has been top of mind for Oura from the get-go. For instance, doing onboarding, we put it front and center. It's not behind a link where you read a 20-page long document. It's concise and upfront. And really, like mentioned, communication, just how your data can be used, how it's not used. An example from we're a partner with NBA for getting the teams back on the field, and we have a health risk management tool for helping without kind of risk pools of players for getting tested for COVID, for instance. And there are a few different, obviously, concerns around that, like, hey, for the different parties seeing the players' data, to what degree can this data be exposed to people outside the organization or the players? And our response was like, we're acknowledging all of those things and seeing how it could be misused and designing for that. And so one solution to that specific problem was, instead of seeing Steph Curry's night sleep and putting you on the bench next day, we're just giving you a risk score, health risk score for a pool of players, instead of showing all of the granular data from their day-to-day life.
I think that's a good point. Your devices at the end of the day don't make your decisions. Like, you're still in charge of your own destiny, which I think is an important distinction that I picked up from that. Teresa, you had something to add?
I was just going to add from a different direction. We often think of it as you're starting and being introduced, but a huge design challenge there, and to understand from the beginning, is what happens if someone doesn't want you to have that information anymore, and what does the product mean if you take away certain sources of data, and maybe that just means it doesn't serve the job anymore, and that's just the accepted terms of starting up. But if you want that product to have a value and a purpose outside of that information, thinking about that in the early stages really helps you shape what happens as permissions come and go or are changed.
It's a really good point. Is a lot of these products, it's like they rely so heavily on that, the data. We just need to be mindful. David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really interesting point. We're still in closed beta, so we're very young on this frame, but our mission is to reverse the metabolic crisis, and so a lot of our value add is along the education front. And I think outside of providing access and interpretation to your metabolic data, we really want to help people understand, because we ultimately want people to succeed at being healthy, and that comes from being informed about their choices and whether they're good or bad for them, and knowing how they can improve. And so a large part of what we're doing now in this new industry is building out the actual the thought leadership pieces on how to think about it. So whether you're like reading that on our blog or on our app, we just want you to get the information and help you improve. And we think maybe if you get the product, it's going to help guide you even better. But yeah, I think it, like, our kind of vision for this expands beyond our main app experience. And
Yeah, kind of expanding on that, kind of going beyond the app experience. One thing that we've noticed is that community and working for the greater benefit of the community really helps creating and building trust. So, for instance, partnering with UCSF for the COVID study, people really feel like they're contributing the greater good, not just tracking their own health, which helps. And also recently we founded ethics committee at Oura, where we really closely vet also all of our partners that we work with, since they are part of the ecosystem. So kind of standing behind those same values around privacy and data protection doesn't also apply to us, but also the kind of companies and partners that we work with.
I think that's a really good point. It's like across the board, like, it's just be honest, be real. as someone who is very much on the communication side, like talk to your people. I think that's the biggest one. Like talk to the people who are going to be using your product. I think that's a lot of the user testing behind this. And we're going to take about 10 more minutes before throwing it out to the audience. So in the audience, I just want to kind of give you guys a quick shout out. If you have a question, you've been itching, use the chat, kind of let us know. We've got a list that we've been curating. But all of us are kind of nerding out on the front of this frontier and like are really excited and probably one really close to the circle. So I'm curious, what are you guys most excited for to see in consumer tech and biowearables in the next 5-10 years? Like what device are you looking forward to?
Well, I can go for health technology, especially. Kind of what I'm excited about is kind of in the future having a deeper integration with healthcare providers and insurance, and kind of the potential of you kind of owning and acting on your own health data. I think there's tons of potential there. And in terms of wearable technology, kind of I'm excited about branching out from the single wearable or the single phone app and have your health kind of extend beyond any given single touch point and have it available across different touch points in your life. So it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to that one, source of data. So I think that's a really interesting prospect, kind of Internet of Health, if you will, instead of Internet of Things. It's pretty exciting now that we start to have more and more of these different sources where you can start to stitch together a full picture about your health. And also, and another thing that's just not related necessarily to wearables directly, but definitely design ethics is something that I really hope everybody in the industry is taking a close look going forward. There are plenty of examples of when tech has gone wrong in recent years. And also it's just sustainability and thinking about the materials, especially when you're working in hardware. There are a lot of different options for you out there in terms of just that. Like it's easy to get lost in the like, hey, let's solve this design problem, but there's always this larger ecosystem that you're impacting as you're creating solutions.
I think it's a really good point. Joseph or Patrick, I see you guys fighting.
Go ahead. Versus all the time, man. No, I kind of want to piggyback onto what you were saying about maybe, like some of the risks, right? It's like we're moving in such a fast direction with things. And I always go back to like the Facebook example. It was like what was created as like a hot or not app became this big platform, right? That completely swayed political elections and stuff. So as we're in this innovating and very kind of fun stage of creating things to help individuals, we also need to keep in mind it's like what we're creating and what can happen if it gets into like the wrong hands or something like that. So always being conscious about what you're creating, and before you give it to the world, is it something that is going to be, like you said, sustainable? Is it something that we can grasp and control? Is it something that is going to be let loose and then it kind of becomes its own entity, it's in its own thing? So kind of like my closing words on that is just always be conscious of what you're creating and what you're going to put out in the world.
Well said.
That's a great point. It's actually really, really similar to something that I was going to say as well. Like first of all, though, like I'm really excited about when things become a lot more passive. This idea of like zero interface is really interesting to me. As a visual designer, maybe that sounds a little odd, but I think like even the way that voice has started to sort of like slowly creep into my personal life, like I'm still just like not there with it. I have to go out of my way to say, oh yeah, I can use this thing. What's the weather or whatever it is. And it still kind of feels like a trick more than it does like something that's like integrated into my life. Whereas like my phone helps me navigate around New York City, or like I can communicate with my team, like on the train or whatever it is. It doesn't feel like it's quite there yet. Like even though like things like smart speakers, which is not a wearable obviously, but like a smart speaker or like even an Apple Watch is necessarily as passive as I hope to see the tech become. And then it just like becomes available when I need it. And the other thing too, and I just like don't know if this is ever going to be the case, But I just, kind of, I guess riffing on what Joseph said about like the idea with like Facebook and just like how much everybody felt so betrayed by what they did with the data. And so like obviously that's pushed the ethics conversation of like what's being done with data to the front. And we're always told that like this information is being used to improve the product. And I'm not completely informed by this, but it feels like the only people that are really protecting our data are people like Apple, who are constantly fighting against like other people creeping into our browsers or our apps or whatever it is. So they're constantly asking for permissions. Again, not an expert there. I could be totally off base. It just feels that way, right? So like tech can't be exploited for advertising. Like I get enough advertising in my life, and I want something personally. And I think for the betterment of like my community, like that actually helps the people involved, right? It's not just there as a way to sell me apples when my blood sugar is low or something, right? I don't know. Maybe a gentle nudge towards that. Like, here's a recommendation, but you're not getting a branded advertisement as a result of that. That's just how I personally feel about it.
Yeah, and just kind of following up on that, being a designer and working on, say, interaction design, super tempting to get all kinds of bells and whistles in a product. And, especially when you have a constrained form factor. When I initially joined Oura, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have haptics in the ring or LEDs or whatnot to kind of help communicate certain things for you. One thing that people actually love about Oura, talking about calm design and design that kind of disappears, people actually love Oura for the fact that the ring is just a ring and doesn't do anything else beyond kind of the data that you get from it. And, as a designer, it's definitely something where there's kind of the natural inclination of like, hey, there's definitely so many more ways we could leverage the piece of hardware itself for communicating things. But kind of counterintuitively, it's actually something that people love about the product.
So I similarly, like we're all channeling the same thing, right? The tech is so great, but you want it to be a little less invasive and the buzzing and the notifications. And so to find the balance to be able to still deliver great value and people still love your product, yet you're not making it buzz all the time on them. Like that's what's exciting to me is when you still get all those smarts out of it without feeling like it's disrupting you in a negative way. So when I think of things that are cool, like it's just more of it without it feeling like it's more. And so if I'm making a wish list of things on the spot, it's just there's so much stress in life. So how can like some type of tech just help me relax more? Like that would be my magical thing right now, I think. It's just like unwinding with more tech, I guess.
I think that's a great point, Teresa. Go ahead, Steven.
No, you're going to say something else? We're good?
No, I'm just segueing.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I'm excited about is I would say a comprehensive personal understanding of where you're at. That's not like so pushy and like going to force you to change behavior, but it's there if you need it. And I think there's so many things that we don't know yet about like how like our bodies are such dynamic systems, and just looking at any data stream might be not like the whole picture, but I see a future where like you have access to all the data, sort of like we have in your finance portfolio or something. And there might be insights on top of it, or you might get expert guidance on top of it, but you have access to it, you can understand it, and you can go look to it for if you're on the right track or you're not. You can kind of dive in, dive out. I think people are, it's really hard to stay on track towards your goals over all of time. And so I think we have to be graceful and like be there when people want to have access. And then, yeah, so I'm excited to continue expanding horizontally and like deeply into like both personal and comprehensive. It's just such a black box into how we operate, how we've evolved and everything. So.
Yeah, and speaking of data and designing for data, especially when you're talking about such a personal thing as your biometric data, it really takes time to get it right. And then it's easy to envision all of these different ways where you could provide insights or guidance. But it just takes time to make sense of it all in a way that you can reliably and trustworthily provide that information back to you. So it's definitely something that we don't take lightly.
I think that's a great point. The biggest thing, oh, sorry, Joseph, I just saw your thing go on.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know you could see that. Just something small to add on to that is, um, I believe we we as humans, we use the tech. The tech should be more of like helping us create habits, right? We don't always want to rely on these wearables to tell us to go drink water, stuff like that. So I feel like the technology should be more of like, hey, let's help you create these habits so then you could do it on your own. And so moving forward, thinking of it as like that nudge, but you have created it in your own mind. And then technology helps you with that habit of creating that like mental.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. Yeah, that's so true. Ultimately, the technology is just there to empower you to make different choices and decisions in your life for the better. Technology can only go so far. It's always kind of, that's our mantra, like empowering you to make, the best health decision possible based on what's presented for you. I mean, it comes down to some of that willpower and that psychology for sure.
I think that's a great point. When something's designed well, you don't know the design that goes into it. I think is the common like design thing to say is like when it's designed well, you don't notice it, which is a weird goal to think about. So yeah, I think that's the last of our kind of guided questions. We're going to segue into some audience-driven questions at this point. So if you have a question, just kind of wanted to give a quick shout out, go ahead and DM the Neurable account or throw it in the chat, and we're happy to kind of walk you through it. I love to see this kind of chat happening. Also, if you have any questions at all that is about Neurable or anything or any of these companies, we'll definitely be touching on this a little bit more. But segueing in, and I think kind of just to kick this off, we noticed like we're big CES watchers. I think a lot of us in this industry naturally are. And one thing that we noticed is a lot of the different signals and trends and ideas to come. So one thing is like we're seeing wearables, and especially biometric wearables is a very exciting future. And one audience question that came in about that is, do we think that wearables could get to the point where they're maybe replacing that doctor's checkup or the 6-month doctor's visit that we have? Or is this going to be kind of we still have to go to the doctor, we still have to figure it out? And I think it's very interesting as we're all kind of Skyping into our doctors right now in COVID.
Drag my mouse over quickly. I don't think it will ever fully replace or say it goes away. It might help as a good stand-in. It might be able to then signal if something's, should be looked at sooner than maybe you thought. I actually personally would think of this as augmenting that conversation. So on an annual basis, now there's just so much to look at to have a more focused conversation in that checkup than the, hey, how are you feeling? And what can you bring to me that you didn't know to call out versus like, hey, I saw how this year went for you. Here are some things that I recommend. And you can just have a much richer conversation that way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like I mentioned, exciting the kind of the prospect of healthcare and insurance and things like that, kind of getting married with wearables and the information that you get from health wearables specifically. It's a different story going to a doctor where you can send them 2 years worth of like trend data around a particular thing versus going in blind and kind of seeing what kind of response you get back from, your healthcare provider. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity there.
A lot of design work because no doctor has time to read a year's worth of data in 5 minutes either. So.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
I think similarly from my side, there are like 3 things. One is also as we get more and more real time, there's just a higher fidelity signal too that oftentimes physicians wouldn't have access to. So I think some of these new biometric inputs will expand what doctors are able to do. And then a second thing would be I think education about what it means and what you should do is very, very tricky. And it's not a problem that you can solve in one day. You have to solve it from multiple angles. And the providers and be one of your best advocates for interpreting your data and doing that. So these are huge. I think they'll always be huge. And then at the same time, to the extent that we can confidently take some of the some sets of the like basic analysis and move that into an intuitive, easy to understand thing you can do by yourself in real, like anytime you want. that frees up more time for the provider to have more human interaction with you and go deeper on what that's going to be. So I think it's going to be really powerful and really good. We're optimistic about that. And I do think you have to design for the provider side too, because it's if it's hard to understand for the person themselves, it's also going to be hard to understand for the provider, and that's a different set of insights, a different set of analysis perspective they're taking.
I think that's a great point. Like, I think of what I would want my provider to know, and I think I saw some chatter in the comments of what I wouldn't necessarily want my provider to know. And I think like the integration with Seamless to my doctor might not be the best integration. So I think that's something that's interesting. But I think throwing it in for another audience question here is, how do you design for people? So recognizing that there's about 120 or so of us on this call, and we're probably all more familiar with wearables than I'm going to say the average person who's out there. But there's a lot of different people. And I think of someone like my mom who has a smartwatch, but she uses it because it's her text. And where's the adoption problems, and where do we need to start thinking through, like, are we targeting them for adoption? How do we deal with different personalities, people, and preferences, especially with things like VR, AR, or, very much like the different products that we use?
Here, I'll kick us off. I think it goes back to asking the people what they want, right? And so sitting down and establishing that conversation. And then when you start that, you start building out personas and certain groups of people. And therefore you could start focusing in, okay, what is it that these certain people want in their technology versus these people? And then you start kind of building out groups and what they need and what you need in order to, deliver for them. So again, it just goes back to asking the people the questions and then forming, certain attributes for these personas and demographics, and then moving the product forward.
I think that's a great point. I think another aspect of that is creating a spectrum of technology for folks, because not everything is going to work for everybody, right? I'm continually impressed by even like just things that already exist and how people have adapted them that are differently abled, that have low vision, or just like simple things that make that experience different. Like there is, I don't think, any silver bullet that's gonna, piece of technology that's gonna help everybody in every capacity. But I love like the things that come out of, I guess it's called naive design, right? When people like kind of hack things to like work for them. You see this with like older folks, right? Where like maybe their son or daughter will come over, whoever will come over, and they'll tape off the remote except for just like the volume, the channels, and the power, or like those big button phones for people with low vision or older folks that just don't have the dexterity to like get in and deal with screens and things like that. And, is this a sliding spectrum of like, hey, it can be this complicated for the people that are maybe a little bit more tech savvy and the hackers that like to get in there and kind of mess with stuff, the people that are buying dev kits and, all that stuff? Or is it like, I literally just want to put this thing on and never have to think about it, and it's just as simple as like scanning something, a ring or a bracelet or something when I arrive for my doctor's appointment? I think that's something that's really exciting. And the other part of this too that we haven't touched on is accessibility for folks that are differently abled. Like, I think there are so many opportunities to, the playing field, as much as I want it to be, like the playing field will never be level, but I think through this kind of technology, we can at least get a little closer. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And in terms of like designing for different types of people and different backgrounds and different abilities and things like that, a good principle is just trying to meet where people are at and cater to that through personalization, through goal setting, and you can start to get a little bit more context around, what's the particular use case for this particular group of people, that you identified through research before. And that goes a long way.
So I'll add maybe an obvious one, but it's certainly tripped up moments in the past. You're designing for people. There are physical things involved here. So anthropometric data, it changes things, and you might have a good population that you're testing with, but if you want to socialize that more broadly, like those factors matter when you look into sensors. So finding the way to incorporate that hardware testing early as well, could drastically change algorithms or just, comfort levels. So getting that data early too is really important.
That's such a good point. I think we overlook actually, to bring it to Joseph's point and Teresa's point, I think we overlook talking to people a lot of the times. I'm going to throw one final question from the audience as what is the one thing that we as people working in this industry overlook all the time? What's the painstakingly almost cringy obvious one that we wish that we just need to say and get it out there about innovation and wearables in the future? This is when
I think so this is something that I don't know if it's applying to everyone, but it really pains me that the cost of wearables are pretty high right now. I think I would really like to see everyone be able to access these sorts of insights, and I think we run a risk of keeping this technology too long, kind of in only in the hands of people who can afford it. And so how do we drive the cost down? So how do you strategically position your company to keep driving the cost down and down and down and expand the accessibility to more and more people? And I think there's just everyone's running out of time. And so I think it's imperative that you get it out to more people, but that sometimes can be in conflict with having a profitable business for a young company. So
I think that's a good point. I think I loved when I first asked that question. Everybody had to stop and think for a second, which is love when the audience comes super smart.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are tons of things that we overlook all the time. But overall, kind of similarly, accessibility in every sense of the word is a huge topic and often overlooked. So definitely that's one thing. And it's been the trend in the design industry for sure the past few years, where it's more and more being brought up, and great efforts on that front. So at least there's change happening, and I think the industries acknowledge all of those things. And not only accessibility, but also, like I mentioned, sustainability, especially the bigger players in the field have definitely leaned in heavy on that side as well. So personally, just really glad to see that at least we've identified those kind of overlooked pain points that we may have overlooked in the past.
That's a great point. Joseph, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I believe also the localization of whatever the hardware is, right? Because we have a certain way here, let's say, for example, America, the way we do things, our trends and our habits. And, by tweaking a small little thing that maybe someone in Europe and the way they do things completely different can completely alter the way that they experience, the hardware. And so it's really focusing on the localization of the device, that it's going to work in other parts of the world the same way that we're using it, but that it fits their way of living and their lifestyle and stuff like that.
That's a really great point. I'm going to call out, I see a really great comment from Tim in the comments of focusing on what's valuable, not just what's possible. So I think it's really fun to build a lot of stuff, which is really exciting, but we got to be mindful of what is actually valuable and what people want and where is this end stuff going, which I think is something that is kind of a recurring theme for today's talk. And we've got about 10 minutes left. So just kind of wanted to give us a quick shout out. First off, foremost, thank you guys all for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. It's super exciting. I want to give everybody kind of a quick chance to, you guys, shout out. I would love to see if anybody wants to stay in touch, can they find you and where can they find what you're working on, and kind of what should they expect from each of your guys' organizations? So.
I'll start because I don't have a good answer. My LinkedIn information is up here, I think. Sadly, I don't have a wearable robot that I'm touting right now. That is not a thing that I'm here to talk about, but certainly trying to just find ways to still help technology really give you more time back into your life. And so, the robot isn't on your person, but it's still in your home, and that's still a very personal space. So how really we can be looking to make our ways way into your life in a way that helps you and really gets more time back for yourself to use however you want is really our goal and mission right now.
I love that. I know you're on my list, but it's like my next purchase, I think.
Let's see. You can find Levels at levelshealth.com or on Instagram and Twitter at Levels. Yeah, there's I would recommend checking out the blog, levelshealth.com/blog. There's a lot of great fundamental metabolic research there. So, and we actually are hiring a lead designer. So if you're curious for more, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, I love your blog. That's like a big public shout out. So very good. Do recommend that blog.
Yeah, so we're currently working with Neurable right now on helping them to bring their brand and identity to life, and some new things coming out that I don't know how much I could talk about. So I'll just say that we're really excited about the stuff that we're doing with their team and Joseph actually to some degree. So it's been really exciting, and we do a lot in the tech space. We do a lot in commerce as well. And you can find us at studiofreight.com or at Studio Freight on Twitter, studio.freight on Instagram. I would just follow the studio over me personally because I'm not very active on social. I like to see what everybody else is up to, but I don't really post myself much. But the studio is always posting new work, so you can see all the new Neurable stuff that's going to be coming out here over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so follow my SoundCloud link. I'll post it up here, and please retweet and like. All right, cool. Now, so yeah, kind of like Patrick said, we're also working with Neurable over at Potato, and we're very excited and kind of hush hush on it, but soon you'll be able to see what we're cooking up. Just kind of a little kind of a spiel on Potato. We're a design thinking, lean UX, agile development. Little studio. We're based in London and San Francisco, and we're also hiring, so check us out. We are at, so our URL is a little different. It's potato.com, but it's p.ota.to. So give us a visit.
Thank you, Joseph.
Well, yeah, you can find Oura online from ouraring.com, OURA ring.com. Also excellent blog on sleep and recovery and things of that nature, health, good supplemental information for Oura. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, using my own name, JANNEKUKKA. Don't post that often either, but hey, can connect nonetheless.
Thank you. And thank you all from Neurable for joining. We really appreciate you guys and are super happy to kind of be building in the same arena. So thank you. I know personally, we're all kind of huge fans of you guys' teams and products. Quick little shout out from Neurable. We will be having a couple of announcements coming very, very, very soon. So thank you. If you want to get the first scoop or the insider information, I know that we're going to have in the chat, Adam, who's one of the co-founders of Neurable, is going to be posting the link to our newsletter list, and we'll have a quick little preview of what's to come and a little update there. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, we do have a Discord where you can come in and hang out with all members of Team Neurables. Anywhere from both our co-founders, Ramses and Adam, are in there, as well as our engineering team, so you can kind of chat. Everybody's pretty open and excited. And I'm excited to kind of see what we all can build together. But one final thank you. I think Run the World kind of kicks you out. If you have any questions, concerns, you can find us online at Neurable. But thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to kind of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you all.
Neurable does these on a once monthly basis, so kind of stay tuned for the next one. Super excited. We'll have one in February as well. So have a good one, guys.